but we are going to record this for all posterity for all times. Hey, everybody, thanks for joining us. When Dr. Paul Henny and I started talking about this subject, and I started putting it out there on social media, I realized we hit on something very, very hot. And this is going to be the first in a series of discussions on what I've just off the top called the hygiene hygienist conundrum, and the shortage or the apparent shortage of positions, good positions in hygiene, and also what we see as excessive, maybe monetary, maybe other demands, so to speak, in the world of dentistry and the communities that we're trying to create. So my good friend of 15, 20 years, Paul Henny, is here with us. Paul has a very outstanding practice in Roanoke, Virginia. I've been privileged to visit him at his office and at his home. He is an amazing student and just a sponge of a learner, and one of dentistry's most, how are we going to say this? As opposed to the quality of your teaching and the universality of your recognition, the quality of Paul's teaching is amazing. He is building now the Henny Center in Roanoke, which is going to be not only magnificent in its appearance and its view, but also in what he's going to be teaching us. And we are going to talk today about a totally different approach to how we work with our communities. So fasten your seatbelts, suspend your disbelief, open your minds, and listen to what Paul and I are going to banter about. One warning, by the way, one warning, both Paul and I have this tendency to talk, and we are not, neither one of us is concise. So if you hear us overlapping, just laugh at us, that's all, because it's going to be a little funny. Anyway, Paul, thank you for joining me. It's always good to spend time with you.
Thank you, Alan. That's high praise. I'm not sure I deserve all of that, but I try. I grind it out every day and try to make what I'm doing relevant, both on the personal level and sharing the little bits of information. Most of it has not come easily for me. Most of what I know and understand, since I've been doing this for such a long time, most of what I know and understand is come through really making a lot of mistakes, really. So
isn't that what we call learning, Paul?
Yeah. So what goes around comes around, and this topic today of particularly of hiring hygienists is not new. There's nothing new about that whatsoever. So we can kind of get into that. The variables that are driving the apparent shortage may be different, different economic circumstances, different cultural circumstances, and so forth. But this has been a common phenomenon since hygienists came on the scene in the 60s. So yeah, this is an interesting topic.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it.
All right, let's backdrop it. And our buddy, Dr. Bob Pick in Chicago is here. The purple cow is with us, or the indigo heifer, as I call him. He is a fabulous periodontist who knows customer service better than most of us will ever know. But anyway, back to you, Paul. You started the Bob Barkley Study Club. And throughout my career, I've always heard his name way back here in the back of my mind. And Barkley was killed in a tragic plane accident, I think the day that I got married, believe it or not. But his legacy lives on because of you. You've dug up so much of Barkley's knowledge, and what you have now is going to be very significant. So Paul, give us a little synopsis of who Dr. Barkley was and why this is so important for all of us.
Well, just for starters, Bob Barkley's legacy is not solely being advanced by me. I really stand on a number of other people's shoulders who did this before me. People like Lynn Carlisle, people like Bob Frazier, and Chuck Sorensen, many Avram King, many people who befriended Bob when he was alive and were tremendously influenced by him, either directly or indirectly, in his writings and in person in many cases. I often wonder what dentistry would look like had Bob survived. He died in 1977 in a tragic plane accident. So he had all kinds of plans for the future. He was just getting involved in, he was already involved in, I think, 3 or 4 dental schools and helping dental schools not only select dental students, but as well as organize their curriculum, reorganize their curriculum to be more person-centered and to have the patient's experience be team-oriented from year 1 to year 4, so that their care would be transitioned even after the departure of the student. There would be a care team that would look after that patient even after the graduation of maybe the primary caregiver. So he looked at dental school as a potential holistic experience. And he also was really one of the first people that got into the consulting business from a organizational psychology point of view. He did a lot of interesting work with Chuck Sorensen, and they were using personality profiling and so forth, to hire. And they were, doing a lot of values clarification work and, developing of philosophy and mission statements and just getting teams of people centered around these things. And then that would in turn drive who you hired or who you may or may not retain, which is a bit of our topic today.
Yeah.
So this is not a new idea. In fact, when I look back at a lot of the stuff that Bob was doing in the 70s, early 70s, mid 70s, a lot of it still is kind of laying fallow. A lot of it is forgotten or, passed over, and it's timeless. It's still extremely relevant, and it applies well beyond dentistry. And so, part of my purpose is saying, continue to shine the spotlight on this information and the continued relevance of it. So, and that's a very exciting thing, because the more I learn, the more fascinated I get about how sophisticated they were at that point in time.
Yeah, and I think I've got a buddy, and I'm probably going to bring him back here if he allows me to. John Blumberg wrote a book called Return on Integrity. And John also has a great course. And John is not a dentist. He's a former consultant for, I forget the accounting firm that handled Enron. John left before that debacle, Arthur Anderson. But John has talks about principles of integrity and moral drift. And what winds up happening, I think, it's happened in a lot of dental practices with a lot of us. It happens in human nature that we just have this moral center and know where it is, right? And then we just drift ever so slightly, and that becomes the norm. And we go a little and a little and a little off. And all of a sudden, Bob Barkley's hair is on fire. And I think that's what you're referring to here. We have drifted off something very special.
Well, I think, on a cultural level, we're in a completely different place now than where Bob Barkley was in the 70s. So, in his time, it was he was living in a strongly Judeo-Christian influenced culture. So there was a tremendous amount of, the vast majority of people would go to church or synagogue or mosque weekly. And those messages would be moral messages. So those would be what was coming out of the faith community was kind of helping erect the guardrails.
Yeah.
For how people thought and behaved. Not everybody, but the vast majority of people. And that's enough to, push the society forward in a broad way. Today, everything is much more atomized. A lot fewer people, a lot less people are getting that kind of experience on a regular basis to help define those guardrails. So what's happening is they're kind of starting to define them on their own, or they're starting to adopt them from other places like insurance companies or wherever. They're accepting other people's boundaries or definitions and so forth. And that without a lot of stopping and introspection, you do get off the trail a lot.
Yeah.
And we as dentists get so busy that usually, it's not until Friday morning, maybe, or Friday afternoon that we finally stop and look back and say, what the hell just happened this week?
Yeah.
Why did I do that? Or what the heck just happened to me? And so we're kind of in a reactive mode. We may be thinking about it even on the weekend, but we're not at a point where we can make any change. And then we just jump back in the same merry-go-round on Monday morning.
Right. So here we are, if I may, Paul, two of us high-end expressives. So we're drifting a little. We have factors and forces intervening that we never thought would. And now along comes Avram King. Let's wind back and go parallel, and let's talk for a moment. What his book, Choosing to Choose, it's kind of hard to get, but if you could get your hands on it, eat it up. That was one of your recommendations to me, Paul. But let's talk about Avram King and what he predicted decades ago, and let's bring that together, and that will begin to make sense of what the hell is going on here.
Right. Well, the reality is that Bob Barkley had primary influencers just like you and I do and have. Primary influencer of Bob Barkley was L.D. Pankey. He studied under L.D. Pankey, got a lot of his basic thinking and focus on needing to have a practice philosophy from him.
Mm-hmm.
But what was unique about Bob's path was that he connected up with this guy named Nate Cohen Jr. In, I think, 1963. Nate had a PhD in educational psychology, and Nate basically told Bob, Bob, the way you communicate with patients is just horrible. No wonder you're so unsuccessful in selling complete treatment plans. I mean, you studied under Dr. Pankey, but now I understand why none of your patients are following through with your recommendations. The way you communicate with people is just wrong. And the fact that you feel bad about it and don't like to do that, I completely understand it, because you're getting so much rejection. Nobody's going to like to do that. So Nate Cohen was a huge influencer in Bob's life. He was a big driver in helping Bob write his book. Nate suddenly died in 1970 from a heart attack, massive heart attack. I think he was maybe 55. So poof, Nate Cohen, his main guy leader, disappears from the scene. Bob said, I had to go back and relearn why I was doing a lot of things that Nate told me, and it kind of made him go deeper. But right exactly at that same time is when Bob met Avram King. Avram King had been working in dentistry as a consultant. I think he'd been working for Johnson & Johnson. He had various positions in dental schools, various things, but he connected up with Bob in 1970. And Avram was a social psychologist. He had a master's degree from the University of Chicago, and he was a genius. He started at the University of Chicago when he was 16. He said Carl Sagan was his classmate at the University of Chicago. They were 16, and of course, University of Chicago is one of the most difficult schools to get into in the country. And so he graduated early, and then he went on to get his master's degree in social psychology. And so Avram King brought social psychology perspective into dentistry. And so this is the more team-oriented focus. It can't be just the doctor and their mindset. It's got to be the group functioning together in a very organized, symbiotic way. That's the only way you're going to get the ball across the goal line. So that's kind of that's where Avram King came on the scene. Avram King said that he communicated with Bob every week from that time until his death, either by phone or by letter. So they were very, very close. Avram King created an organization called Nexus that wrote a newsletter. I think he did something even before that. He was primarily focused on working with orthodontists, I think, before he met Bob. But Nexus was kind of his most well-known initiative that evolved into some consulting relationships and so forth. But he was a great writer and kind of thinker. And that's when I became exposed to him, when I saw some of his writings in 1980, 85, maybe 86. And I thought, wow, I've never even thought about dentistry like this. I've never thought about my relationship with the patients in this way. I've never thought about this perspective. And so that really drew me in. I knew him through his writing. It took 15 years for me to finally meet him and actually work with him. A few years before he died, we brought him in as a speaker in the Bob Barkley Study Club, which we founded in 1998. And we went out to Scottsdale and met with him. And I think we did another event in Kansas City as well. So I had I'm not going to say I knew him well, but I had a fair bit of contact with him in combination with his writing. So it had a lot of influence on me as well, because he made me think about dentistry differently, but as did Bob. When I read his book, I thought, oh my God, this guy knows what I'm thinking. He not only knows what I'm thinking, he knows what I'm worried about. And he not only that, but he has answers for all the things that I'm worried about. And it's like, how the heck did that happen? He's like been dead for like 20 years. So so Avram King sort of, who was still alive, obviously, kind of became my connection to Bob. And then I eventually came to know John Barkley, Bob's son. And John took me to Macomb, Illinois, which is where Bob practiced. So I got to see it and sort of get a personal tour and explanation of what was really happening there. I actually met Bob Barkley's a clinical assistant. She was 90 years old. So, and we had interviewed her and had a fantastic conversation about who Bob was as a person, because, a lot of us anyways are familiar with who he was, from a clinical perspective, as a dentist, who this person was, but to hear about him, as a man, what his character was like, what his relationship with his children was like, all of that. So it was very, very interesting experience for me. I'll be quiet.
That's all right. I'll tell you to be quiet when we're offline in my own way, Paul. I've done that to you before. Paul, so here we have two guys who were way ahead of their time in figuring out that, number one, this stuff is all about relationships and communications. Preparation, restoration, occlusion, margins, that comes afterwards. And all of that stuff also with the people working with you. I think what I remember from Avram King, he predicted that dentistry is going to split into different niches. And we could talk about tiers, but keep it simple, that different types of dentistry, no one right or wrong here, but you got to know who you are. And this holds true now, since there are dental hygienists here in our audience. There's also assistants and administrators, I'm sure. But I think the disconnect comes from being something and trying to practice something else. Lack of vision of who you are. And something we talked about yesterday, Paul, as we were preparing for this, something you said to me really rang true. And my very first hygienist, who was with me at the beginning, Gail Ardakanian, is here. And this is going to resonate with her as well. Gail is doing awesome in her career. But you said to me, no excellent hygienist can be maintained, that means retained in practice, without a clear philosophy that is congruent with the dentist and the practice. And we learned this directly or indirectly from Bob Barkley and Avram King. Go.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Go.
Well, I would say, first of all, Avram King, projected that dentistry would fragment basically into three, what he called tiers. And so he said the drivers behind this will be technology and marketing. And he said, there'll be a bottom layer tier, what he called tier 1, and that will basically be what he called closed panel dentistry, maybe the kind of dentistry you would get if you're in the military. You don't get a choice who to see or when, you just go and they do it to you. Level 2 was a kind of a what he called retail dentistry that was going to be influenced a lot by marketing. At that particular time, it looked like there were going to be dental offices in every big mall. That's changed. Now they're outside the mall, but it's still the same idea. It's a kind of an insurance-centered, mass production, marketing and merchandising driven level of dentistry. But the central mission is efficiency and making money for the investors, basically. So tier 1 is really about just taking care of the group. In the case of military, it's readiness. You're aware of that, Alan?
I'm very aware of it. I do it. I love it.
And so, readiness is their purpose, and readiness means, this guy or gal needs to be able to be called up next week and not have a dental problem in the next 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Tier 2 is really a capitalistic, venture that's focused on generating maximum revenues and profits. Tier 3 is what I would call person-centered dentistry. It's dentistry that's focused on the needs and the health of the individual, so it's personalized. And so Avram King and Barkley were big fans of this guy named Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker was saying, hey, the whole game is changing. We're gonna move into an area of what he called mass customization, meaning you can have sped up organizations, but everything's got to be individualized. And sort of an example of our time was, how Dell came on the scene, and you could get on the internet, and you can do that now with a lot of computers, but Dell was the first one. You could specifically design your own computer. So mass customization. Tier 3 is kind of like that. It's personalized dentistry based on, not only what the purpose of the practice is, but what does this individual want? What's this individual looking for? But to be successful in that role, that person's values and objectives and priorities need to be reasonably in alignment with that of the practice, or there's just going to be constant conflict.
Yeah.
So this is where, values clarification, all these other things kind of become very relevant.
And Paul, man, for 1 second,
yeah,
we're not, let's understand something here, because there's all kinds of dentists and team members, or what I now call community members, watching us. There's no judgment here. This is just simple reality, and whatever segment you fall into is okay. Because we're endowed in this country with 3 inalienable rights, Paul: life, liberty, and the pursuit of a Tesla. No. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of a big house. No. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So let's, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I do that a lot. You do that to me a lot. But let's just make very clear that knowing who you are and practicing so you're happy is what we're looking at here.
Right. So knowing who you are and where you are, and asking the question of yourself, is where I am where I want to be long term? These are all important, self-reflective things, but and that's where kind of this topic of hiring becomes quite relevant. You're going to hire a different person for tier 1 than you will for tier 2, and you're going to hire a different person for tier 3.
Yes.
So in the case of tier 1, and I can speak to this personally, as a prior Navy dentist, I was assigned to a ship. My support staff was already selected. They were there. I was the newbie. So I had to fit into their culture, and I had to take the weaker members of my support team and bring them up as best I could to my level, but I had no power to hire or fire. I had to just make it work. And so that's kind of the way government sponsored anything works. You get what you get, and you just try to make the best of it.
Yep.
And it can frustrate the heck out of you, but that's just the reality of it. Tier 2, you're going to be hiring people that are, into the business model of the corporation, whatever that might be. And that's usually high efficiency and so forth, and insurance centeredness and other things like that frequently. Tier 3 is going to be much more of a personalized experience. So the kind of person you're going to be looking for is somebody with a much higher level of emotional intelligence, for instance. You know, they're not only going to have a technical set of skills they're going to bring to the game, but they're also going to bring a higher level of emotional skills that they're going to bring to the game. And
Yes.
so it's playing at a much higher level, and you're moving away from managing people to develop what I would call developing people.
Yes.
So the difference between tier 2 and 3 is tier 3 is focused on development. Tier 2 is really about, you know, just getting the dentistry, identifying the dentistry and getting the dentistry done as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And that development piece, Paul, is very important, because if we are going, well, whatever type of practice model we're in, we have to develop not only the patient, but also the team or community member to move along in a content, happy at the job, fulfilled manner. And I think that's where the disconnect starts to come in.
Well, and I'm as guilty as anybody of this. You know, there were times in my career that I was very unsophisticated about how I hired people. And as a consequence, I made bad decisions. And sometimes when I made bad decisions, my first response to that was to deny that I'd made a bad decision. And I would just live with it, but I would like simmer in it. And I would look for reasons, for any other reason that didn't involve me and my decision-making was game.
Yeah.
So it took me a long time to like have to own that. Well, if you've got a problem with your staff, there's like only one person responsible for that. And that's the person that you're looking at in the mirror every morning.
Yeah.
And so that sucks, having to like own that, because that puts a lot of responsibility on your shoulders, not only in selection, but also in development. And so the more sophisticated your practice model, the more sophisticated you need to be about hiring, and the more sophisticated you need to be about development.
Yes.
If you're gonna hire a bright, sophisticated hygienist, let's say, they're gonna get bored as hell if you just put them in some remedial role that everybody else is doing. They're gonna want to leave dentistry, maybe.
Or
So,
seek a position with a higher salary, thinking that that's
or they're going to chase the money, So you've got to create a stimulating environment that's growth oriented for that individual. If you really want to keep the high achievers, a team of high achievers are the hardest people to retain, because you've got to constantly be looking at what are their needs, what are their expectations, why are they coming to work here?
Yeah.
And so it's hard as dentists, it's very easy for us to lose focus on that, because we're so distracted by so many other things.
Yeah.
And we very easily want to put that part of the practice on autopilot and just sort of let it go. And the average hygienist probably be fine with that. He's leaving me alone. He's staying out of my hair. He's not telling me he or she's not telling me what to do. But the top level hygienist is going to go, what's going on here? There's like no freaking leadership around here. So, yeah. and so if they're the kind of person that probably has some leadership skills too, that's the reason you hired them. So they're going to be uncomfortable with that. Mm-hmm. So, you've got to hire for not only for the role, but for the position, but you've got to hire for the role, which is a much broader perspective.
Jennifer Stanley is a hygienist and I believe a consultant also. I don't know if you could see the chat. There are so many reasons for the shortage in our industry, our profession, please. It cannot be pigeonholed into just one thing. It's way more broad than that. Yeah, it is. It is. But I think that what we're talking about here is making the profession of dentistry attractive by knowing who you're trying to attract as a community member, and by not disconnecting from your own personal values and your job values. When we blend those two, and who cares what it is? If you're a volumer, great. But if you're a leader who doesn't want to lead, if you're put in a position of leadership and you can't lead, there is a problem right there. And I think I'm reading a great book, Paul. We talked about this yesterday. I forget the author. Last name is Pulver. I think last name is Pulver. I love it here. And if you want to be the type of leader in any organization, it's connection and expectation. You can't have one without the other. If you want good results, you got to connect with people so that you and they understand each other and are driven by the same things.
Right. And I agree. This is a very, very complex issue. You know, you throw COVID-19 in the middle of this thing, it gets like exponentially more complicated.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people have, a lot of hygienists and other staff have left dentistry just because they didn't feel safe, or they didn't feel that the office they were working in was really addressing the problem on a significant enough level for them to feel comfortable there. And then, you know, they had to go back to their families or children or grandchildren or whatever the situation is. And it just wasn't working for them.
Yeah.
And, you know, the ones that maybe they were the second breadwinner in the home, they had some freedom to just say, I think I've had enough of this. They left, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, that's a very big part of this as well. But there's also, you know, there's burnout. There's a lot of things. There's you know, just the physical demands of being a hygienist are huge.
Yes.
You know, my previous hygienist, you know, she had to have rotator cuff surgery, and she was out, you know, for 6 months from that. This is before I had worked with her. But, you know, she'd been practicing hygiene over 20 years, and, you know, she was physically, it was really taking a toll on her. So, I mean, they're, you know, running a very sped up practice with hygiene assistants and all that. You know, there's only so much the human body can take. And so if the practice is just focused on production and it's not really dialed into the, you know, the humanistic needs of these team members, you know, they're going to say, nah, I've had enough of that.
Yeah. If you're looking at the chat, Cindy Rogers is also a very, very fascinating, brilliant woman of dentistry. I feel some were waiting for the excuse that they needed to run away because they weren't happy. Yeah. COVID-19 was a perfect cork to pop.
Which is kind of that may be a good segue into talking about probably your best prospects for hygienists, and really for other people are people that are already working, but they're not. Their spiritual needs, other needs other than financial needs, are not being addressed very well. Now, what I've found is that a lot of hygienists and other support staff don't even know there's other ways to practice. They don't know that maybe down the street and around the corner there's a practice that the culture and environment is completely different than the kind of mill environment that they live in. That's the only thing that they understand and to see, and they kind of have a one-dimensional perspective of what dentistry is. So the challenge becomes, how do you communicate your difference out into the community so that, and this is the same challenge with marketing for patients. If you really have a unique practice model, if you really have a unique experience, if you really have a health-centered purpose that you're delivering day in and day out, how do you get that message out into the community? And so that can only begin with a very clarified, you know, philosophy. Yes. And that can only begin with, you know, clarified values and all the other things that precede it. And you know, the best people I've hired were already employed someplace else, and I found an effective way to connect with them and say, hey, oh, by the way, you know, your experience in dentistry, and this is true, again, this is very similar with patients. Oh, by the way, your experience in dentistry may be incomplete. You may not understand some of the other aspects of dentistry that exist, but you just haven't been exposed to them. And, you know, why don't we have a chat about that?
I think that's a very, very serious point, because I think in that we are fighting external forces, both from third-party payers and from the so-called pro-competition environment that's been created to lead people to believe that a cleaning is a cleaning is a cleaning, a dentist is a dentist is a dentist. And we on the inside know that that is absolutely not true. Not one better or worse. We're not going there, because there is a market, there is a segment of the population for all this, both in our teams communities and in our patient communities. That's not the issue. But the issue is that we offer a unique and remarkable experience on whatever level, and that's where we have to play. That's the field we've got to play, both as employers and employees.
Right. And there's going to be a particular person that you're going to hire that's going to be a better fit for that. And there's going to be other people that aren't going to fit very well. And conversely, in that tier two example, that retail high merchandised example of dentistry, high speed version, there's a person with a certain temperament that fits that better, that's going to stay there longer. And it's the person that really doesn't want to think too much about it. And particularly they want to, when they hit the door at the end of the night, they don't want to be thinking about it either.
Yep.
So, they're not the kind of person that's going to worry about, what happened to Mrs. Jones today and how she feels about it, versus, a more highly empathetic person who's going, oh, geez, that was really a struggle with her. And I know there may have been some confusion about what happened or this or that, and maybe I should call her and just make sure she's doing okay.
Yeah.
So this is a very different kind of person. And you're not going to teach that into anybody. They're going to arrive with it or without it.
Yep.
And so your hiring process needs to be dialed into looking for that, aspect of their personality as well. Not just them talking about it, but them doing it as part of who they are as a person. So your practice purpose, your practice mission is very much in alignment with who this person is inside. So what they instinctively do is what you would tell them to do without having to tell them to do it, right?
Yes.
So and that makes leadership easy. When everybody on your team is kind of shared values and priorities, then that's kind of where my practice is now. I don't spend a lot of time telling my team members what to do or when to do it. I just kind of walk around and go, well, that was cool. I like the way she handled that. That was a lot better than I would have done, or whatever, so it's they get into a position where they're so strong in their area that I'm learning things from them, or I'm standing back and kind of admiring, wow, that was pretty masterful how you handled that.
Yeah.
That was tough. That was tough. So, but that, those are, players that play above the rim a lot, and that's not your average person.
Correct.
And so, it who you hire and who you retain really needs to be aligned with what it is you're trying to do. Where are you going with this thing long term?
And if we turn it around, Paul, if we look at the other side of that card for our hygienist, assistant, and administrator friends out there, it's who you accept a job with should be determined, if you want the best result, by who you are, what you love to do, where your heart is, and evaluate the practice owner and see if it's a fit. If it's not a fit, unfortunately, the world's going to retain you.
Yeah, just like patients, employees, prospective employees aren't necessarily that sophisticated about making those decisions. Sometimes that you've got to kind of help them.
Yeah.
So my most recent hire as a hygienist, I just had her come. I said, why don't you? I didn't even have her fill it. I'm starting to do everything the same way now. I didn't even have her fill out an application. I just had her come in and talk with me. And after we'd finished that conversation, that was maybe 20 minutes, I said, would you like to just come in on Monday and just hang out and maybe shadow Julie, and just see if you think you'd like to work here.
Yeah.
And so, and I said, you can stay as long as you want, ask any questions you want. And then after that was successful, I said, well, why don't we do this a little more structured? Let's let me get your details. And so we just kind of stepped into it. But my first concern was whether or not she was going to be happy here. It's got to be win-win. Does this align with who they are or not? Does it? And it's going to resonate with them pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah.
Or not. And, then you can kind of go into a more formal hiring process when you think you've got a kind of a psychological, philosophical match.
Yeah.
The other piece of it that probably isn't talked enough about is just interpersonal chemistry. And after playing this game for a long, long time, I can't predict who's going to get along well with who in advance. I can think, I may have a decent idea, but it's sort of like chemistry. You don't really know until you mix it all together and see, is this going to be synergistic, or, is there going to be some subliminal issues that are really going to be troublesome? And so some of that stuff you got to test out, in maybe a 90-day hiring or something like that. But so there's always an unknown piece as you jump into this. But if you kind of do it with your eyes and ears open, you can maybe make fewer mistakes as you proceed into it.
Yes. And we're going to make mistakes. We have, and we will. But I want to take you back to just a moment ago, Paul, when you talked about that initial meetup, that there's no forms, there's no disc, and there's everything right with that. But the way you, and to a degree I am able to do it, is we know who we are. We've thoroughly introspected, and we're pretty clear on what we want to do and how we want to do it and who we want at our side. That can't be done on a whim. That takes a lot of mental work.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're either you have a proclivity towards introspection or you don't. I mean, I've certainly met a lot of dentists who just, give me the handpiece and tell me, hand me the burr and just let me grind some teeth dust. Yep. And that's what drives them, and dealing with people and dealing with people's emotions and dealing with groups of people and the complexity of all of that. That's like, I think I'll just hire a corporation to run my practice for me.
Yeah. And if you can't, if you don't want to do it, don't do it.
And there are other people that, like me, that I like kind of getting involved on a granular level. I like understanding, but it is a lot of work. It takes a lot of, I'm not perfect by any means. So it takes a lot of self-understanding about where your blind spots are and, where you need help.
Yeah.
And organizing yourself on a higher level.
Yes, exactly. One of the things that all of this is going to lead to, and it's something you've seen me screaming about from the mountaintops, is that the missing ingredient here, back in the early days, Tony Robbins used to talk about live with passion. I remember hearing those tapes, but I think it goes beyond that. And I think the word passion is used a little bit much. But I think if there is a culture of love in your office, love at an appropriate level, obviously, but that if we can blend together with cohorts in our practice, that we're all on the same page, we're all on the same side of the box, pushing together towards some common goal, there can be a bond of love created in the office that is so special, that makes Monday morning a good thing, and it makes you happy. If you got to work, you might as well work happy, and you can have a culture of love and happiness that generates loving kindness, as our friend Dave Karsten talks about, every single day. Not perfect, but every single day, so some act of loving kindness is going to happen in that office, and that's a great thing.
Well, yeah, and I completely agree with that. I've frequently write about and think about M. Scott Peck's book, Road Less Traveled. And if you haven't read that, that needs to be on your reading list, because it's basically a maybe a 275-page dissertation on what love is and what love is not. And that really opened my eyes. Scott Peck kind of defines love as really kind of the unselfish, giving to another person for the intention of their personal growth and development. And, there may be times when that isn't very fun. And let me just give you a good example. There probably were, 1,000 or more times in your life, Alan, when your son or daughter was doing something that didn't make you very happy, and you did something out of tough love to kind of get their attention and get them back on course. That's what I'm talking about. Is you had a bigger goal in mind. You had a long-term goal in mind about what you wanted, what kind of man you wanted your son to be, and what kind of a woman you wanted your daughter to be. So you were standing back with a philosophical perspective in mind and saying, we got to do a little direction change here, And so
you can phrase it that way.
So, if you start looking and done with kindness. And so if you think about loving your patients, loving your staff in that kind of framework, you've got a broader perspective, you've got an agenda that's developmental for everybody. You're trying to bring them up to their highest potential and the patients. And you do that with leadership, principle-centered leadership. I mean, that's love. I mean, that from that perspective, that's how Scott Peck defined it. And the other thing that I loved about that book was he called people who refuse to learn. He defined that as evil. Somebody who denied their abilities, their God-given abilities, refused to access them and develop them. And he said that to me is kind of what evil looks like. The failure of a person to really become what they were able to become. But anyways, it's a book that really makes you think about a lot of things. If you've never read it, I'd strongly recommend it.
All right, Paul, we could go on forever. And we have in the past, personally and here online back during the lockdown. But this perspective, I hope, gives all of you an idea of why some of this stuff is happening. And as Jennifer said, it's very complex, but foundationally, I think aligning with the right office or the right hygienist, assistant administrator, etc., is really foundational. And nobody practices and preaches that, Paul, like you. Give us please, a short synopsis of this incredible project you're working on, the Henny Center. It's going to be in Roanoke at the top of a mountain with an amazing view. I've been there, but no, I haven't. You've invited me there. I've been to your old home. Right. We'll get to the top of the mountain, but tell us just give us a synopsis of the Henny Center in construction and what you're going to be doing there, because it's really exciting.
Well, what's going up on the mountain is, which is almost exactly 30 minutes from my office. But it's about 1,500 feet higher up in the air. So we have actually a different climate up there. So when it's 90 here in the valley, it's a nice 80 up there, upper 70s, and not so humid. So it's a really nice place to be in the summertime, in the heat of the summer, and all seasons for that matter. But anyways, here at my office, actually where I'm sitting right now, is part of my teaching center. We have a hands-on lab area where we can seat about 12 people. And then we also have a lecture area that can seat about 22 people. And then I've got what I'm building up on the mountain is a big space that can probably have about 40 people. That'll be for kind of retreat kinds of things. meetings that where you would tend to kind of break up into small groups and maybe think for a while, take a walk on the pass. We've got 10 acres up there into the woods or whatever you want, down to the creek or the barn, and then you come back and maybe share with the group what you're working on. This would, be maybe a philosophy statement or a mission statement or something like that. And these kind of team development sort of workshops. So that's what I kind of plan on doing up there, is kind of facilitating dentists doing more of that, because that's at the core of what we've really been talking about over this last hour. Is if you're not clear about that stuff, you can't get clear about who you're going to hire. If you can't get clear about who you're going to hire, you don't know how to develop them, or you don't know why they're not happy or whatever. So, the center of it is, as Dr. Pankey said, know yourself.
Know yourself. Yep.
And then that needs to be carefully shared with the team, and you need to select people very carefully that are in alignment with that and what you're trying to achieve. So that's kind of thing we're going to do up on the mountain, in addition to just have dinner events and things like that up there.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is, and I've been at your courses, and my crew and I have been down to Roanoke, and we've studied with you, and I've spoken for you in the past, and that was one of the high honors that I've been given. And I got to tell you, Paul, you are pushing a very high level of learning that is not for everybody. We wish it were, but it isn't. And I would encourage you to go to the Bob Barkley Study Club on Facebook, because Paul's writing is fascinating at worst and inspiring for sure. And what Paul is going to be doing, if you can get to it, don't even think about it. Don't even think about it. Watch this guy, because he gets it.
Well, one of my favorite Barkley isms is he said, we got to make people think. We got to make our patients think.
Yeah.
If they're not thinking, they're not learning. And if they're not learning, they're not going to be able to change.
Yes.
And so I try to write things and create situations that maybe push you a little bit into the discomfort zone and make you think about why you're feeling that way, because I'm just trying to catalyze maybe a new perspective about something.
Yep.
Most of these things that we're talking about are not, as I already mentioned earlier, most of these things are not easy things to understand or acquire. They can sometimes take years or even decades to really kind of get under your belt.
Yeah.
But the only way that you can achieve it is to just stay on it and suffer through the mistakes and keep asking the questions, because otherwise you'll just get stuck and frustrated. And I think that's where a lot of people are in dentistry right now. They just don't know what direction the answers lie. And,
Yes.
and my answer to that would be, it's the place to start is inside yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
That last piece that inspired this get together that you posted on the Bob Barkley Study Club page, that I peeled away from that. I don't want to say ripped off, but I peeled it away and put it out there for a lot of people to see. You made me very uncomfortable. And a lot of times you do that. I'll go through some of your stuff and I'll think, what the hell is he doing now? And by the time I get to the end of it, I think, damn, I got to think about this. And then a couple of hours later is one of those moments. And yeah, Paul got me again. So do read.
Yeah, that's my purpose. Get people thinking.
Now,
And
I'm going to put this up.
I don't really care. I mean, if you've got a solid defense against me or whatever, I'm glad to discuss it. That's what I want is dialogue. So
yep, respectful discourse, curiosity, listen generously, all the things that we've learned and that we teach. Speaking of which, couple of things that I'll repeat on my page. Number one, this is being recorded. It will be here on Better, Richer, Stronger. I've also got a YouTube channel in development, and we'll have it there. And I'm sure, Paul, I'll send it over to you, and you can post it up. So this is for you all to partake in. We are here to grow you. We are here to make life a little bit better, and Monday morning not suck. And we're going to announce this later, but Paul's and my very good friend, co-learner, teacher, inspirer, Mary Osborne, will be with us on Friday on Facebook Live, because Mary teaches both of us. She learns with both of us, and she calls herself a recovering hygienist. So Mary will give us a hygienist, coach, consultant point of view on this. And it will be just a total mind-opening experience. And we will further explore this thing here, because the connection, the consistency, the congruency, the integrity of ourselves with our work is really the key to a happy practice and a happy life. So I hope this was helpful to all of you. Paul, you're my friend de tour. You're my friend, you're my mentor, you're my buddy. I cannot thank you enough, not only for being my friend, for contributing to my development, but for all you're doing for this profession. You're a special guy, Paul, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for the opportunity. Talk to you soon.
Thanks. All right, everybody, have a great weekend. Live healthy, eat right, get some exercise, make somebody's life better each and every day. And of course, Paul, you know this one, enjoy the ride. Paul, stay with me.
All right.
All right, we are offline, and we'll stop the recording.